Mr. Townsend. It's your first time in Slovenia. How are you feeling?
I don't know yet. I've just woken up. I think it takes me a lot longer at this age to understand how I feel than it did when I was younger. But the venue is very nice, and the internet is fast, and there's seats on the toilet, and so the day seems to be starting off quite well, to be fair.
Okay, so on this tour you're touring with Fear Factory. Do you think the audience is different because of Fear Factory?
In some instances, I mean, we've been sort of flip-flopping in terms of who closes the show, and there's some territories that we do well, and there's some territories that Fear Factory does better. So where they do better, they close, and where we do well, we close, and it's a similar audience, but pretty different in its own way. You know, like when there's nights that we go over very well and Fear Factory not so much, and then the other way, like Fear Factory goes over very well and us not so much. So it's, you know, it's similar but different, I'd say.
Okay, so do you think Fear Factory audience wants you to play harder material?
I don't know about that. I just think that what we do is pretty specific, and it's a little left of normal, right? So usually what happens with the music that I do is people see it the first time and are confused by it, and then the second time they know what to expect, and they take it for what it is, right? But I also think that because Fear Factory is a harder band than us, they get all they need in terms of the hard from Fear Factory. So for us to try and do the same thing doesn't make much sense.
Okay, so before that tour, you recorded a special show in London called the Retinal Circus. Are you satisfied with the whole production of this show? With how the show went through?
Yeah, I mean, I'm satisfied in that we had no right to be able to pull it off. I mean, the scope of what we were trying to do with the budget and with the time we had was just absurd. So the fact that it worked at all, let alone was successful, is fairly amazing as far as I'm concerned. And I'm putting it together now, the mix and, you know, and the sonic elements of it, and we actually played pretty well, better than the live stream would suggest. But I'm going to mix it in a way that I think is going to represent exactly what it is I want it to represent, and hopefully when we edit the DVD, we'll be able to guide people's view to what was supposed to be looked at. Because I have a feeling that at the show it was just such a overwhelming visual thing that a lot of people didn't know where to look, right?
Okay, so this year you released an album called Epic Cloud. I read that firstly you were writing music for other album, but then it came to Epic Cloud. How did it came to this?
Well, I tend to write by allowing myself to be free or liberal with my subconscious, and so I always play guitar. There's very few times when I don't have a guitar around me, and I don't sit down with an intention and say, now I'm going to write this. Anytime I do that, it ends up being just sort of, you know, not so good. But instead, what I do is I sit down with a guitar and I just play, and then things start to happen. And the things that happen are usually representative of where I find myself, either career-wise or in life or circumstance. And I guess I had assumed that when I sat down with the guitar after deconstruction, excuse me, that I'd be writing like Ziltoid type music. But as it turns out, I suppose I had so much complicated music recently with deconstruction and even Ghost that what became natural to me was much more simplistic, sort of acceptable or accessible style of music, which became Epic Cloud. So I just sort of went with it.
So, okay, you mentioned already that you're working on Ziltoid Part 2, so how is the whole thing coming up? How is the writing coming up?
Slowly. I want to take my time with this one. I've been putting out so many records so quickly that Ziltoid, I think, deserves a bit more time. And I suppose I could put out a record this year, I have enough material, I guess, but I want to analyze the material a little more, and I want to make sure that it's the right material as opposed to just a whole onslaught of odd outer space stuff, right? I think that when the Ziltoid record comes out, all these parts that I've been written will be included in sort of a box set, I'm sure. But I think that it deserves just to take some time, because I want it to be also like a movie and a comic book and a puppet show and an orchestral thing and a choral thing, and it's a big project, so I'm going to take my time with it.
Okay, so and you announced you're working on an album called Casualties of Cool, which is gonna have a kind of Johnny Cash vibe, and for the drummer you chose Morgan Agren, which is known for his jazz skills. So can we expect a silent album with really complex rhythms?
In a way, yeah, but subtle. It's very subtle. Like, it's complex when it's complex, but when it's not, he plays exactly what's needed. I mean, I think the thing that makes Morgan such a fabulous drummer is that he's good enough to be able to do what the song needs, as opposed to, going over the top just for the sake of it, right? A lot of drummers who maybe aren't as confident would use it as an opportunity to do crazy stuff. But because he's as good as he is, he does what's needed until such time that it needs to be complex. I got a cold, sorry.
Yeah, okay, it happens. So, are you gonna continue under the name Devin Townsend Project, also with Casualties of Cool and the second part of Ziltoid?
I don't know. Should I?
It's hard to say.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep the logo. Maybe I'll change it to Devin Townsend Presents. I like the logo.
Okay, so, and you released 5 albums in 3 years, so probably you have a lot of leftover songs. Mm-hmm. So, how do you choose which song will be on the album?
Well, I just sort of start to massage it, I guess. You put together a playlist in your iTunes or whatever, and you just listen to it, and then you'll know as you're listening. It'll one song go on the next, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's cool." Then all of a sudden, another song will start, and you're like, "Well, I didn't want to hear that." So you move it around, and then you shuffle it around, and then you maybe make a little intro or whatever, and then after the course of the record, of the recording, 3 months, year, whatever it is, you'll find that some songs work and some songs don't, and some songs work well into other songs, and other songs don't work well into other songs, and then some songs work, but it would be nice to have something heavier that you don't have, so you have to write something heavier, and so you just kind of work on it.
Okay, and with album Ghost, the 4th one in Devin Townsend Project, you said there is also another part of Ghost.
Yeah.
Probably a dark one.
Yeah.
Can we also expect a Ghost 2 release?
I think I'm going to use Ghost 2 as the second disc of Casualties of Cool. That makes sense to me, because they're similar in some ways. Not totally similar, but in some ways similar. So I think that would make a good second disc and a good opportunity to get that music out.
Okay, so considering my time is kind of running out, 2012 was a busy year for you. You did a lot of touring, you released an album, you recorded a special show. So what can we expect from you in 2013?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I just continue to work, and I continue to follow the work where it leads me. I wouldn't have guessed that I would be here last year, so I would suggest a lot of things, but what those things are currently unknown to me. Lots of touring, though.
Okay, and for the last question, what's your message to Slovenian fans which are going to see Devin Townsend for the first time?
I hope to see you on the second time where it makes a little more sense.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, man.